everybody, and welcome to African Feminist Solidarities Couch Conversations. I'm your host, of course, Yolanda Kyanki, and thank you so very much for joining us. I'm really honored, I'm very grateful for having you guys in this space and for sharing your time. Really, this conversation is about getting to know what the project African Feminist Solidarities is about. We're getting acquainted with some of our content contributors we have here today. We have 3 of 14 beautiful women from all over the country, including Rwanda, actually, so it's continental. So we have a participant from Rwanda and Malawi. So I'm really excited. As you can tell, I just want to get into the conversation with these 3 women who are going to tell us about their involvement in the project and really what African feminism means to them. So thank you very much for joining me, for joining our audience. Maybe we can start with introductions.
Absolutely. I think I'll just go first.
Yes. Hi, Yolanda. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Mbali Mazibuko. I'm a PhD. I'm going to start with all the boring things, okay?
Nothing is boring.
all the boring things. But I'm a PhD candidate in Women's and Gender Studies. And I'm also a researcher in an Institute for Gender Studies. And I would classify myself, actually, just to be a little bit provocative, as a feminist slay queen.
Nice.
Yeah, and a raging badass.
Yes,
so
queen.
That's how. I think that's a fitting way to just introduce myself. So yeah.
I love that.
Oh my God, so difficult to come up to that. I'm Pulane Mafatshe, aka Unina Simono Sazola, aka Shaka Khan, aka Stumpy Villas. Look, there's many also known as I'm a writer, hence I'm sitting on this couch.
Of course.
I'm a singer as well, and I'm also a student. I'm a learner of the Arts Academy. That's my passion project. Kind of solidifying that art space as an academic space. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird speaking about yourself. Don't you kind of hear? Yeah. So yeah, I'll just talk a bit.
Hi, Pulane.
Okay, I'm Gorata. I am a PhD student, a researcher, and a writer. And yeah, I think that's me.
Really? Is that it?
The rest you'll find out through the conversation.
But the real G moves in.
Silence.
No, guys, thank you so much for that introduction. I think also just to kind of brief the audience and people who are watching this a little about the project, what African Feminist Solidarity is about. It's really a digital publication that has been launched on archive Amabali Wethu's website. It is a reader which consists of a collection of African feminist narratives of solidarity, resistance, hope, and love. It is an effort to reflect and raise awareness on African women's positive contributions and experiences and impact around what feminist solidarity is and means to them. This project highlights the framework of how women for centuries collectively have navigated violence and injustice. This project also aims to create a body of work that supports a favorable investigation and gazes into narratives on Black feminist discourse. This narrative is an honest input on feminist solidarities and how they connect. So with having kind of laid that, I think I should also just maybe briefly introduce myself. I am the director of Archive Amabali Wethu. I'm also the project manager of our first ever publication, this digital anthology that I've had the pleasure to compile with these women. And so today, really, we just want to delve into why they participated in this project, what African feminism as an ideology, as a framework means to them, and also more so get into understanding what memorial work as a woman, as an individual who lives in the society, and as we try kind of write ourselves into existence, why has it been important for them to participate? Why is that kind of framework of living and doing things, I guess, and addressing gender inequality important? So that, guys, not nervous, but we're gonna do this, and we're just gonna learn.
We're doing great.
We're doing great. This space is a learning space. We're all here to learn and engage, and hopefully, we just leave here having felt connected and just inspired to really continue doing whatever it is that we're doing that feels good not only to us but also to that 1 or 3 other people who receives it. So thank you very much. Just to get really into it, right? I think the first question that I have is, what did it mean to you to participate in this project? And submitting your work, your written work. I know you submitted poetry and nonfiction and fictional work. Perhaps you could just, tell us about that.
Who's gonna go first?
I feel like the person who asked.
So, like, I had, like, it's so strange. When the call came out, right, I was like, I write short stories, about, my experiences as a woman, and not necessarily putting them in the framework of, like, some kind of bigger gender discourse, but just, like, my everyday experiences. Not to say that the work is about me or anything, but, like, also observing, like, what I experienced from others, like, the kind of everyday, the mundane, right? The things that no one speaks about, the ones that are not part of the statistic. And I just took a risk, really, to say that, are you really going to unravel? And, look, I wrote, and then I just submitted just based on chance, and the selection. But also, the reason why I wrote for this particular publication is to say that I acknowledge that my experience as a woman is peculiar and runs the risk of being erased and forgotten because of how systems work, that are bigger than us. So if I do have a voice, especially as a writing girl,
a black writing girl.
Exactly, as a black writing girl, thinking of writing even as writing, because picket lines, you're done there, so how else do I fight back? And it's through my voice. And I'm not saying I'm fighting or anything, but, like, it is what it is, to say that put your foot in, like, just do it, because that's how we start creating this footprint that is to be remembered. That's how we do memory work,
By just starting.
By starting it and being a part of it and acknowledging that that's what you're doing.
I like that.
I'm just gonna go in here, sorry, because I'm feeling very inspired by Pulane's response. And for me, when she said it's about fighting, but she's not actually fighting, I think it is fighting.
Yes, girl.
Because for me, responding to your call for contributions felt like an opportunity to actually fight for myself. And as Pulane was saying, there's all sorts of anxieties surrounding, can I unravel in this space? Is it safe? Yes. But there was something in the texture of the call.
Yes, that made it.
And there's also something about your story as well that felt to me like I have a responsibility as well. Not just to the many, I'm going to say specifically Black women, right? The many Black women that are always in the periphery and violated even in the ways that we can't quite articulate. But you feel a discomfort, right? So I felt responsible because of that, but I also felt like I was responsible for myself in that I needed to find an opportunity to write something to myself. And my contribution, I don't want to get into it fully now, but my contribution, more broadly speaking, which is about rage, for me also felt like, because at the time that I wrote it, I'd just completed my master's. And my focus in my master's, actually one of the chapters was rage. And, the power of rage in protest. And how we were able to see that, I think, in very explicit ways through the RU reference list. And even in the power of the ability to kind of texture hashtags. So you're not just reading it, but you're feeling it as well. And so you're seeing it. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I was very moved because I had these things kind of sit in my belly. And I didn't quite know that apart from like an academic approach to it, right? Which was my master's, that I was able to also kind of focus on me. So I really appreciated the space, and I think that's why it was so important for me to try to write something for your consideration. So also thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. I think for me, I think the theme of the call really spoke to me, African Feminist Solidarities, because I think it's something that we are involved in a lot of different ways. And for me, solidarity has been important, and I would say life-saving. So I had to do it. Like there was no, there was no way to just let the opportunity pass by. And also it was an opportunity for me to kind of really step out of the whole thing of only focusing on academic writing, because I don't think, even though I am usually like my main hustle is being in academia. Yes, it's a hustle. Even though that's my main hustle, that's not my entire identity, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I also like, you know, the types of writing that get praised in the academic space where, okay, if you have a peer-reviewed what, okay, now you made it.
Yeah.
Yes, so I was just like, you know,
is revered.
yes, exactly. And I was happy to be part of something that, you know, we're just doing it because it's important, not because we're trying to make career moves, just because it needs to exist. So that's why I participated.
I like that.
Guys,
So wholesome.
I love this.
Waiting, you know that thing.
Okay, so I mean, thank you. It's really interesting to hear your guys' perspective on why you participated, and I think also having gone through briefly the different submissions, right? I was really. I you know, maybe I'll just we'll take this obviously by turns. I just want to, you know, speak to each of the individuals' submissions. Gorata, you submitted a poem and it's titled "Paper Cuts," and you know, I'd love to know what inspired you. You know, where were you in, like, what point or place were you at when you were writing and putting this piece together? And I just have a bit of, you know, like a few lines that I'd like to just read that really speak out to me from your piece, and it goes: "We know there are costs. We learn how to move between silence and survival for our memories to outlive us. We learn to read time in ways that muzzle urgency. To protect our truths, we code them in rumor until they steal a moment like this and catapult out of our mouths. We will not sing his praises. We, the embodiments of inconvenience. We, the repositories of fallism's debris. We, the anointed killjoys. We will not be silenced forever. Screaming into histories and futures, we will tell them he is a rapist. We will return to the placards as ritual. We will interrupt your theater with our own." And that for me really just, when I read those lines, right, it took me to just being on the ground. It took me to a moment of being enraged, you know, filled with anger and water. You know, took me to 2016, Fees Roads, what is this? Are you references? God damn, Yolanda. Are you references? Child. It's like I'm forgetting my own trauma. No, but you know, like it really just, it's so poetic, and it really took me to that space. And you know, for me, really, I do think and consider protest as ritual, right? Just that space being such a holy ground and a sacred, I love that, not like sacred ground. We all have with a specific intention. Obviously, there's those few people, right? And I could be going on a tangent right now, but
But we're not going there.
We're not going there. But I was really just drawn to this, and I just want to know also, like, where were you coming from when you wrote this, and what does it mean to you, and why this submission?
Okay, thanks so much, Yolanda. It was really special to hear you reading it out. So I've been writing poetry for most of my life, but you know, there have been phases where I didn't write. And I think after I moved from attending Rhodes University to Wits, I think something after, you know, leaving Rhodes made me just open up creatively and start writing. So this poem was inspired by an observation of a protest that I think I saw in Memories. Not with. So okay, when I mean actually what I mean when I say I think I saw it, it's coming back to me now. So what happened was I was on campus at Wits one day, and there was, I think, a protest in which a prominent student leader was, you know, I think he was being lauded for something. I think he was fighting against exclusion, so on and so forth. And then in the middle of that protest that was about fees, accommodation, there was a protest within that protest by a handful of women who had shown up to the protest to inform the new cohort of students that actually this man you are defending is a rapist. So I was on campus when part of the fees protest was happening, and then I'd go home later that day and see the online protest with these women holding this placard and saying he is a rapist. And that's where the poem came from. I was really moved by the fact that in the legacies of activism that I've been involved in and the ones that are also that I'm witnessing, you have this trend of people making sure that through information we're going to protect each other. And it's a very obviously controversial method to name and shame people. But I think for me, as someone who has understood how institutions, the police, all the people we're supposed to turn to won't protect you. It was really moving for me to just witness in a new environment, right? That people are going to make sure that in some way, you know, the rumors that we protect each other through are being forwarded, and you know that
taken seriously.
because like anytime a new student cohort comes into a university, they don't know the history, they don't know all the collective knowledge that we have, you know, and that, you know, speaks back to solidarity. Solidarity is protecting each other, and that's where the poem really came from. I was really inspired by that. I think it was like 1 minute of a video that I saw on Twitter, and the I think it was four women who took that stand to be like, you can praise him, but
we are saying
this is the situation.
That's so powerful. Pulane, you submitted a piece, and it's titled "The Land of the First Waters," and I must say it was also quite heavy. I think it speaks to loss. I could be wrong. You know, but I think also words, a few lines that I could relate with, read as follows: "They were never meant to be made in that water, let alone live in my first waters. Their life was ruined by being born. And I pray that, unlike me, my baby is not too consumed with wanting to be seen. I hope that they are content with the fractured image of their beauty. I hope that they can forgive me for leaving and bring them into this world. I wish they could understand that it was never my choosing, and may she, with love, labor for those that look like her without that luxury. I wish them a life and future clothed in choices. May they know that they can unfold and unravel in any way that they choose." This, I don't know.
There is something quite peculiar about it being read to you, I will say. You know? Because, it definitely speaks about loss, right? I think when I think about, you know, existing, right, as a girl person, at some point or another, losing something is almost always a guarantee. And it's never about you giving it to the next person. You are losing it. You left it there and it's no longer there. Someone took it. So I want to archive that experience as real. You know, it's happening. So we must acknowledge our experience as that thing, that we lose things, you know. And in the midst of that, we need to kind of not even obsess with the project of finding those things, but there is something that needs to be found outside from where we are.
From that loss.
Yeah, right. So I don't even know, you know, because like I'm just talking about characters. But like at the end of the day, it really does boil down to even changing the way that we see loss, right? Fundamentally, yes, it's unfortunate. But what happens after that, you know? Is there life after that? Can I still continue to you know, fully exist, fully be after losing something, you know, not just a stock suite, but, you know, a very big part of you, whether it be your family member, whether it be your virginity, whether it be your child, whether it be, you know, whatever it could be. Is there life after experiencing that tearing, you know? And I'd like to think there is.
Yeah.
And through like, you know, fictional work, I'd really like to imagine spaces where we dive into those new worlds
Of solidarity.
After that loss, because it does happen. Our lives go on, and that's the miracle.
If I may, I think what Pulane is speaking about is really kind of making clear where my poem came from, because when I was at Rhodes, we experienced as a collective of activists a really painful, traumatic, I don't know even what are the words, a pain. It was a trauma. So, yes. It was on your shoulders. And it was such a loss that I feel like it can never be put into words. And then when I moved to this new campus, it was like what you're describing. It was the afterlife because I was presenting in a new space and I was experiencing different things. But when I saw that video online of these women that I've never met interrupting the space, it felt like something about my loss was still there and coming back to it and seeing that, even though I'm not with the people that I had that trauma with anymore, I have other people that the solidarity is there even if we don't know each other.
Yeah. Because that's how wild this violence is, guys. Heart. I mean, I really like your experience. I really like that take that you guys have shared. Thank you for that. There's also, when you were speaking, I was thinking about, maybe what is the link as well between like generational karma, generational solidarity.
Even that. We lose our older sisters in this fight because sometimes bias, even our mothers, the way that they...
I think even besides Yugoslavia, sometimes there's I think languages change.
Yes, as well.
Languages change, irrespective of a generational difference. There is languages change, and then there's I think a sense of ownership over some kind of language that we've been tied to, or history, that it's so difficult to navigate an altered reality.
Yes.
And the people that are in that particular space that are able to then lead, right, in terms of dismantling or disrupting or destabilizing. So I just think it's, it's perhaps an unwillingness. And that makes it very difficult to have a very, genuine intergenerational sense of solidarity. Yeah.
Because of the rage, and speaking of rage, but your
points of entry.
Your piece is titled Vota. Raging Conversations with Feminist Solidarity, and I really love that. And, a few lines as well from your piece that I really love. I think it's right at the beginning. You say, rage to me, and you set this out, right in the beginning. Rage to me is an ethic. Rage is a political and moral inclination to act, to mobilize, and to stand in solidarity. Rage is an invitation to purposefully and radically recognize that the world and its men, with their violent masculinity, inspire an undeniable rage within. To use that rage as a historical and political location is to put yourself in a position of readiness to stand in solidarity with African feminists, women, queer, gender non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. Rage is an indicator of resistance and readiness to respond to the call to action. Raging then, as it moves beyond the descriptive boundaries of rage, implies that we are always in motion. We are standing together, moving together, Vota.
Yes.
I love that.
That's a lot. That is a lot. I wrote that.
Wow. You did. And I'm just I feel so seen by these words. I feel acknowledged. I feel like my anger is justified. It has a home. So thank you to all three of you guys for your pieces. But could you tell us a bit more about your piece, where it comes from? I mean, yes, Vota.
Listen, this piece comes from very difficult places. Let me say that. And I think for me, at the core of those difficult places, what anchors them is the trope of the angry black woman. And I always ask myself, why am I not allowed to be angry, right? And even when I am allowing myself to be angry, I'm ashamed. Why are you angry? I was like, why are you angry?
Ashamed. Society shames you for being
angry. You're not only ashamed, you are also ashamed.
Exactly. So, being voter. Yes, in Zulu they say "Vuta malangabi" when the coal is doing this, right? But it's the flames are starting, but they're not yet, as big as they should be. That's what I was feeling, and it was triggered specifically when I was doing my master's, as I mentioned, was actually on loss, rage, and laughter, in protest action against sexual violence. And when I was these themes are all interlinked, and coming to this was for me saying that this is how I am actually healing from my loss. And the loss is a loss of many things. So yes, there's a loss of a sense of safety, a loss of a sense of freedom, right?
An identity.
An identity. So, and how I was thinking about it was, how can I move past this? How can I shift? And instead of negating shame, I sat in it and allowed for it to do what it needed to do. It changed me, it moved me, it informs my politics today, right? And it speaks to a lot of other areas of my life, and not just even like in terms of the fear of violence, the threats of violence, the reality of violence, but also just, I'm angry because black men don't love black women. You know, that's what things I'm raised. That's enough. I'm enraged at a lot of things. So I was really brought to that by, I think, but as I said earlier, it felt like my first kind of coming out party of myself as well. And it's important for us when we're memorializing collectives that we're also able to not create a homogenous picture, but how we can then differentiate is to say, yes, I understand, but this is also my story. Right?
In this big pool.
Yes. In this big pool. So yeah.
No, I really love that.
And I'd like to jump in a little bit, and not to say that, like, especially on that issue of homogenous stories, not to say that even one story must, in the tradition of like the way that we understand the world today, colonialism and patriarchy and all of those messy things that we know have this tendency of glorifying or kind of making a particular thing, you know, a particular gospel, or just giving it the grandstand, and everything else on the margins just falls on the wayside. But I feel like it's really important for us to shift that entire structure and say that even if the story doesn't necessarily come into the other, it's also exists. And even when the story is against, like, they don't have to exist in harmony for them to be valid. We've got the absolute responsibility to argue and engage each other at the most highest level of honesty and truth if we ever want to attain anything that matters. So yes, we exist within rage, and yes, we can be peaceful, and yes, we can be indifferent.
But these are simultaneous as well.
And they can happen at the same time, and no one is more important than the other.
They're all important and productive.
Exactly.
And I think this is why also creating this platform was also just, I think, important to the organization, Archive Amabali Wethu, and just to me as an individual, just, you know, kind of showing, you know, as Pulane to the world that there's all of these different experiences that can exist at the same time, that do exist at the very same time. And, you know, they are a result of whatever larger, you know, kind of violence that we are subjected to. But it's not the same, it's different, but there is that point of connection. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
and
like,
that's where the solidarity
comes in. Because in your loss, I can recognize myself. I might not have gone through whatever it is you've gone through, or feel the same rage, or kind of like maybe whatever cathartic or non-cathartic experience you have in that space. But I recognize, I think for me, it's the value, the ethic of acknowledging your experience, and it is
legitimizing it, saying it's knowledge.
You know, this is really exciting. Okay, so then my other questions are that what do you think, you know, in light of maybe your positions as these individuals, whether you identify as a feminist activist or not, but what do you think is the status of African feminism as an institution of knowledge, right, or body of those principles? I don't know. Very messy. But like generally in this climate, right? As we were speaking about like the rise of inequality, more so now in this post-pandemic era, post-pandemic era, right? Where inequality is rising, and obviously the global north continues, patriarchy, they continue to rewrite the narratives where they're obviously centered, and those who have been marginalized remain on the periphery. So how do you relate with that, and maybe see your position, your work, and your efforts to, you know, kind of countering that work?
Well, for me, I've had to kind of very much divorce myself from like that framework to begin with, because it's quite daunting to realize that in this day and age, in the whole 2021, I'm still nothing, right? I can take part and whatever, write my little stories, publish my articles, you know, act in your little plays, but still nothing really happens. So for me to survive, I have to kind of divorce my everyday from kind of thinking about that. And that's how I choose to kind of be productive for myself. However, we need a game changer, y'all. Like, we need to change the strategy. This is not working. Whatever it is that we're doing now, it's not working because it actually perpetuates. And we need to understand that feminism or feminist sensibilities or feminine sensibilities, let me say that rather, will never be catered for unless if it works for capitalist value. Right. So if we really wanting to do something serious, we'll tackle that first, and also maybe even guerrilla war. I don't know. Like, we need to think of we need another strategy. Like, whatever's happening right now, it's not working. And I'm not saying people must go to some exile of some sort and start training. Maybe I don't know, but like we need a different strategy. Like, whatever's happening right now, I can't even answer it because I could say, oh yes, definitely. I can complain, I can growl and say, because it is messed up. But like, my positionality, even my creative work, even my life's purpose doesn't have capacity to even punch a hole in that like world system that's been built to almost ignore me the whole time. So existence. We need to also be aware that we don't exist. You are not in the system. You're constantly erased. So how do you undo that? You need to be visible, and then get then you move, you know. And I think this is also an ode to visibility, to say that, hey, yo, I'm still here, you know. So yeah.
I think when I'm thinking about, you know, the conversation of like, what's the status, where we at, I think something that's sticking in my mind is something that Kiguro Masharia said in a writing workshop I was in the other day. And basically the question was about writing and how do you find time to write? And he said that there are writing seasons and there are times where he doesn't write. And I think the way I'm thinking about activism and what we need to do is that there are times for each of us to be strategizing, time for us to be on the ground, whatever that looks like. My ground will be writing, and also time to be resting. So I think that it's always difficult for me to figure out what the status is, because sometimes I'm overburdened, I'm exhausted, and I can't really be active, right? But I'll be kind of, what's the word? I'll be motivated and encouraged by seeing other people take on the struggle. And I think as long as people are getting angry and people are, you know, becoming enraged and organizing, that's important. Because I think we can't, it's like on one hand, the problem is so overwhelming, but for our own sustainability, we can't always be on the front line. We can't always be working and fighting because, we'll burn out. And I think we've seen, I think the Fallers generation has seen what burnout looks like. But yeah, like, it's one of those things where, you know, sometimes it feels like nothing's happening. And I think, and maybe something that maybe needs to be like encouraged is like, you know, as, you know, people who've been involved in activism for a while, maybe when we see the younger generation suddenly get angry about fees, we're like, how they only found out now. Exactly. But at the same time, we're exhausted. We need to mobilize and be together and make sure that they know our strategies. They know what works and what didn't.
So they don't start from scratch.
Yeah. Because we've been those people starting from scratch. And for me, it's, I think as long as people keep getting angry, I'm not saying the country is safe, but I feel like something can happen. It's the momentum that needs to keep going. I don't think we individually always need to be the angry ones all the time. We also deserve to be peaceful and resting and recharging, and just trusting that if we mobilize our our resources correctly, we can create a stronger movement across generations, which is really important.
Which I think is the actual
It's
point.
Yeah.
And perhaps I'll just now also give what I'm thinking. Just in relation to the question, I always think about nuance. And I think my form of activism, how I understand like my own, you see, you're like, I'm not trying to do the African feminist thing, right? I'm like, I get it. It's tiring. So it's tiring, it's triggering, it's a lot. But I'm still, for me, it's just to like kind of pick out the nuance, right? And for me, when I think about nuance, I think about it in relation to how even our positionalities or our politics, so even how we embody ourselves as feminists, right, is also not always, but is very still entangled with the very colonial way of doing things. So when I say nuance, for me, my activism is to be able to show, listen, there are things that can depart from one another and quite literally stand in opposition to a point where you think they're not reconcilable, right? But there's actually no wrong and right. When we understand nuance, I feel like we get to really the center of power and how it works. It's designed to confuse.
Exactly, truly.
No, power is designed to confuse. You know, it's to say the slave queen is wrong, but the one with the afro is right.
And it's
But both of those ideas are still very entangled with the colonial way of understanding how African women should be,
And present
right?
themselves,
So for me, my form of activism is not only to embody the nuance, right? But also to inspire it. Because we shift and we move. A black woman is not just a black woman.
Yes.
There are seasons where I'm angry. Exactly. I'm playing in the afro. Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that when we're able to really think and recognize the nuance, we're able to then see what is this colonial influence? How is it working? And then that's where the shift happens. Then we start to actually think about not just what people are doing, but how they're doing it. You know, and yes, and you know what bodies of knowledge are coming into play to really, you know, antagonize or cause these oppositions. So nuance, I think, is my thing, both individually, but also I think in my own work. I like it. Nuance that is called. I think I always think of
And social media, it's Twitter.
nuance for what? But black is black, white is white. I'm like, how? That's how I grew up.
Read a book.
Don't
I think, Mbali, what you're really speaking to is people going deeper than the surface level. So like, I'm not saying we shouldn't be angry when like hair care product people are like racist and stuff, but like, you know, there's so many arguments that don't go to the root of things. So when we're arguing about like girls with weaves versus girls with afros, as if, you know, one can never be the other. It's like if you choose a lane, that's you forever.
Like you can't change.
Why do you have a weave to excuse me, ma'am?
Like, you know, these things, like, on one hand, the hair is political and that has been acknowledged and important work was done. But like, at the same time, it feels like in society sometimes we don't get past certain arguments. Like, we're not going to the structural root. Like, we're arguing about hair when we could be arguing about the fact that we don't have like a basic minimum wage for everyone. Like, we really need to talk about that.
That's the real tech.
Like, before
you're making persuaded at work. How about it?
I suppose that's also because of like the hypervigilance of black women as well. That we're really able to shift the focus from things that matter and then we just police and we focus on what are the black women doing. Meanwhile, it's like we just voted but we've got load shedding.
Honestly, like
you know what I'm saying?
We're trying to record, we don't know
You're busy there focusing on that kind of left the person into pound
So you are missing girls for crying out loud. That's actually rallying around.
Like with the rate
If we're really going to be ready
the world. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think for me, kind of shifting the focus and understanding that nuance, as you're saying, as you're also teasing out, which is very, very important.
And I think also just really with what we're doing right now, right, with this discussion and really just with the publication, this project, right, is kind of addressing or challenging these different narratives, experiences, issues in our society, right, and kind of just, definitely giving space for these conversations, important conversations to exist. And so I think, for me, really, that makes me happy because, it's not every day you go onto social media or you turn on the news or you go onto YouTube and there are people who are actually engaging in issues that concern us, women who look like us, right? People who look like us. So, honestly, I'm thankful, guys, and I think really also just to tie into really the I guess also the objective of the space, right? It speaks to memorial work and documentation, and again ensuring that in this battle where the system is pushing against us and ensuring that we're not here and that we don't matter, we're pushing against that, right? And so why maybe you have answered this question, but I think just to specifically to speak to it, like what does memorial work and ensuring that our identities as Gorata, Pulane, Mbali, what does it mean to you, generally in the greater scheme of things?
For me, and I'm going to be very brief, right? I think memorial work it needs to exist as something that's continuous. So it's important for me to not just focus on the self. So you can memorialize by way of writing or blogging or something like that, or designing stuff or things like that.
There we
go. Okay. But I think it's also about passing it on. For example, I'm 2000 like this.
Yo, I love those kids. Yo,
like this. So when I'm memorializing, I'm giving parts of myself away. What I'm wanting to give away, right, that they can continue. And I'm also existing on a genealogy, so I'm not the first. I'm just in line of something else that's been happening, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is now paying it forward to say, some cuts is on rule. Pizza, enjoy your life. It's like if that's the principle, then they must know. If you need to get the bag, you need to do this, girl, do it now. And do not be apologetic about it. So it's like, not just that, there are many other things that we're paying forward. But it's to remember that it's not just this. We're one generation. To not forget, consistently engage, impart knowledge, learn from them. So when they're moving on, they're like, I once met you, Alan. What A, B, C, and D, Ganjan. Then they start speaking also in their own collectives. And in that way, we're already memorializing institutions
imparting
of Black
knowledge,
women. Exactly. And it's going forward. So it doesn't get lost. There should be no secrets. It mustn't get lost. Singabe ama gatekeeper. Let's
only
Singabe ama gate. John will get then we must walk in the gate with them. Do you get what I'm saying? We must go. We mustn't just be like, I'm not going in that gate. Because who are they going to go with? They don't know what's happening there. We need to be there. So just paying it forward, being there, engaging, and ensuring that what we know is carried in the motion.
And that it's also not stagnant, like also just the transfer of this experience and knowledge, right? It's also just not stagnant, that what they know also rubs off onto me and I'm able to unlearn and adjust and, just go with the flow of things and not be stuck being problematic or whatever the case may be. I like that, I really do. Guys, look, wrapping up our conversation, seeing that ESCOM is against us, this really has been very insightful. It's been really insightful. I think what I want to just close off on is just to pick your brains on, perhaps in this conversation of speaking about creating bodies of knowledge, however way we do or contribute, right? Is there a specific framework of knowledge that you yourself are inspired or influenced by, such as policy, for instance? If there's a specific policy, because in this world, in this this very capitalist, corporate, very bureaucratic, there's policies and processes that people must follow to address gender equity. But I feel like there are other ways. There's art, there's history, there's conversations, right? Is there anything specific that speaks to you and how that influences your involvement in addressing gender-based violence? Because of the prejudice that exists, right? And in this world where, as I touch, it's capitalist, we value this piece of information more than another person's information or contribution to the space. I value Gorata's work because she's a PhD student, but I'll look down on Yolanda because she doesn't have a degree or qualification, right? But I carry perhaps bodies of information or knowledge that might not be found in the academy. So it's just, is there anything that, this, maybe the space also speaks to that, the project that we're working on, but generally in your line of work, rather. What is it that influences you? in terms of like knowledge systems?
I'd like to just jump in real quick.
Do so.
Girl, you're welcome.
There's this amazing, theory, right? That they think of as the Black aesthetic tradition, which is understanding Blackness or Black existence as primarily, obviously, a resisting one because we understand oppression, blah, 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 blah. But the twist is to say that Black characters must be victorious, right? We are tired of seeing a particular narrative about Blackness or even womanhood or Black womanhood as something that should be
in need of saving.
Victimhood. Oh no, but she did this to herself. That question that everyone has asked, who's wrong in
It's a no.
No, stop. Shallow. We need to see people that kind of deal with these kind of complicated situations that have to do with our everyday lived experience, and I think like many writers and thinkers prior to our time have spoken about rediscovering the ordinary, go back there to the everyday and kind of seeing how everyday people can win, right? In my workspace, that it's not a policy, but it's the rules in Black aesthetic tradition to say that it is my duty as a storyteller to write stories that win or write characters that win, so that if I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, even me, but oh shit, she made it. And winning is also very, complicated because what I see as winning is not what we leave room for imagination and perspective, and that's how we can, kind of attain these things. So for me, it's through actually going back to the root of what storytelling is, going back to people's real lives, because even if we can look at ourselves, we've won so many times, and we don't take time to say, hey, you've done it.
And you won, you survived that.
You survived that, you won. Yeah. And that keeps the momentum going. So me, I'd like, maybe if there was a policy in life, but I guess it's a creative
I think that's more of a call for a cultural change.
Yes.
That's over and above what we're seeing on paper and in some kind of constitution, right? But in the everyday way that we're actually engaging and interacting.
True.
So,
word is bond.
I think in my where I am now, right? I think I'm being influenced by anything that is, how can I say? I'm influenced by anything that is against injustice, and not in the cheap way of we're going to have a high heel march for men and then that's going to stop violence. It really bothers me. It's a direct, it has to be direct because it's guys, this can't be it. And the thing is it's so easy for people to kind of gesture like they're doing something. I'm I actually want action. And action doesn't have to be, something glamorized as a protest or, some
policy.
As a policy or whatever. But also just the parents who are accepting and defending their queer children.
They need to organize themselves.
Yeah, they really do. But those actions that happen on as you were saying, on an everyday level, on the mundane, I'm interested in anyone who, despite wherever they come from, are prepared to really defend people and defend people across different marginalizations, to treat people well and to be connected to the fact that the world is a painful place to live and it shouldn't be like this. That's my main
And how
principle.
I'm not trying to contribute to that pain any further.
Yes.
Yeah, I really love that.
Yeah, I think anyone who looks at the world and says, no, it's not right, they inspire me, and that's the work. That's the policy that
Those are my politics.
Yes, that's what I
The
subscribe
framework
to.
that you follow.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the policy.
I mean, guys, look, this has been absolutely amazing. I think I've learned so much. I have learned so much. I always love hearing Black women's perspectives. Just the body of wisdom or knowledge that you guys carry, it is to be valued, it is to be appreciated, it is to be memorialized, it is to be passed on. And I just want to say I'm so thankful for you guys trusting my organization, myself, with your work. And I really hope that, everybody else who gets to engage with it and this conversation as well, is able to just kind of learn about us individually and why we are doing this together, right, as a collective. And so I just want to say thank you very much. We have wrapped up the conversation. And I really, just for me, you have summed up why I'm doing this work, why this project is important. And I just hope that, whoever gets to engage with it feels the same way, or slightly, just a little bit, and I'm sure they will. So thank you very much. I'm sure they will. I'm working with you three, so... No, honestly, thank you so very much. And I think really, again, this feeds into the larger idea of what Archive Amabali Wethu aims to do, which is creating platforms of engagement and expression, where we do document, we value women's experiences, we value the marginalized, I am marginalized, however way you want to call me, whatever it is, the other. We who are not male, who are not cis-het, right? We are here to challenge the narrative. We're here to rewrite and write ourselves and to carry the legacies of those who've come before us. So I honestly am so excited to see the growth of this work, the growth of our initiative as this collective and group of women. And thank you so very much. So we'll see you on the next one.